Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate it. This is Jason Johnson. Welcome to The Beat. I'm in for Ari Melber. We start tonight in Nashville, Tennessee. Suddenly, a national flashpoint. Vice President Kamala Harris making a surprise visit to the city. She will attend a service for the group known as the Tennessee Three, where she is expected to speak soon. Harris also expected to meet in private with the trio of state Democrats who face an expulsion vote from Republicans for their protests over guns. And again, I want to be clear, their protests over asking for legislation to stop the massacre of children. Two of the Democrats, both of them black and among the youngest in the General Assembly, were expelled yesterday by the Republican supermajority. One lawmaker, Gloria Johnson, an older white woman, narrowly avoided expulsion. Tonight, fears about the precedent this sets and the potential for a kind of revenge politics spreading to other states.
This is what happens when you lose democracy.
Cries of anger and accusations after an extraordinary move by Tennessee House Republicans.
Expelled for so-called decorum violations.
It might have to do with the color of our skin.
It looked like a Jim Crow era trial.
If it can happen in Tennessee, it can happen anywhere.
The first partisan expulsion in the state's modern history.
To expel voices of opposition and dissent is a signal of authoritarianism.
We're going to keep fighting it. So
it was so nice to have somebody to fight with me for the first time.
my sister.
But I will keep fighting for you all. I won't stop.
Former President Obama speaking out, denouncing the expulsion as the latest example of a broader erosion of civility and democratic norms. But Justin Jones and Justin Pearson say they are not giving up. A majority of the Nashville City Council already committing to reinstating Jones at a meeting next week. Both are also eligible to run again in future elections. And under the Tennessee Constitution, lawmakers cannot be expelled for the same offense twice. So Republicans would have to come up with a different reason to get rid of them. In other words, bring your bullhorns again, guys. We've got a lot to talk about, from the explosive politics to the legal repercussions to the larger battle over guns. Joining me now is Alencia Johnson, political strategist and advocate who's worked on numerous presidential campaigns, including Joe Biden's, and former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance. Alencia, I'll start with you. The political implications of this are huge, right? We have the national story, which is that Republicans have demonstrated for more than a decade now that they have no interest in passing any legislation that we have now deemed reasonable gun control. No matter how many children get killed, no matter how many parents get killed, they offer no real solutions. So just as a political position, the Republicans are defending something that most Americans don't like. But at a macro level, Alencia, if you were talking to the Democratic Party in Tennessee right now, what would you be telling them to do about these expulsions? What action should they be taking?
Well, I would tell them to keep doing exactly what they are doing, to be at the state capitol, but also take this protest to where Republicans actually start paying attention, and that's the economy. There are a lot of industries in Tennessee. There are a lot of interest in Tennessee, and so Democrats should be pushing on different companies, and we've seen this happen across the country on several issues, from voting rights to abortion to these bathroom bills. We've seen this in so many other states. Democrats need to make sure that the culture, corporations, are on the side of the people, and that is against these arbitrary promises or these arbitrary, thoughts and prayers that the Republicans tend to just tweet about, but they don't live the actual principles of Christianity, which is the works piece of the faith. They don't want to do any of the work that is actually going to prevent any of these shootings. And so if I was Democrats, not only would I continue these protests, would I continue occupying that rotunda, would I continue galvanizing these young people, I would also talk to these companies and make sure that they are very clear on their position and that the Republicans also feel it. The other piece, too, that Democrats need to continue to do is galvanize this base of gun violence prevention, folks. Moms Demand Action last year, volunteers from Moms Demand Actions ran and won 140 races up and down the ballots. And that's what Democrats have to continue to do. And to be honest, I have a feeling we're going to see more young people in Tennessee run for office. And when both of the Justins get back to the Tennessee state legislature, there might be other advocates their age, too, in office.
I want to turn now to Joyce. I want to get to a legal issue, Joyce, that you raised about these expulsions with the 1966 Supreme Court opinion explicitly addressed these things. And I find this fascinating. So a state cannot limit legislators' expression of views on local or national policy. Quote, debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open. So, Joyce, what does this mean for the Tennessee Three, and how does this relate to my former professor at UVA, Julian Bond, and his history with not being seated in the Georgia legislature?
Right. So the situations are a little bit different. Julian Bond gets elected to the Georgia legislature in 1965, and they refuse to seat him over some anti-Vietnam War comments he makes. And he runs in a special election. He's reelected. He runs in a second election. He's reelected. And all of this time, his case is working its way through the courts until in 1966, a month after that final election, a unanimous Supreme Court says, hey, Georgia, you can't do this. You violated his First Amendment rights. You can't precondition seating him in the legislature on limiting his First Amendment rights. So it's a little bit different situation. In Tennessee, we've got two sitting legislators. The First Amendment principle is the same. The First Amendment is intended to permit legislators to represent the people who elected them to office. I think it's abundantly clear that Tennessee has violated the First Amendment rights of these legislators, just straight up. The situation probably gets fixed, Jason, as you said, by the local process, where they're reappointed and they can't be expelled again. But it's worth focusing on what President Obama said. This is a failure of our institutions. This is a failure of democratic norms where the legislature would flagrantly violate First Amendment rights of elected officials to retaliate against them for representing their constituents.
So, Alencia, going with this idea, we're right now assuming, right, we've heard from sort of Nashville politicians that they will be sending Jones right back. But I hear word that there is possibly contention and resistance from the mayor of Memphis of returning Pearson. What could be the consequences locally if local politicians tried to deny, even within the Democratic Party, tried to deny Pearson returning to office? He is just as much a part of this protest, just as much a part of this movement as Justin Jones, as Gloria Johnson. What would be the consequence if they tried to stop him?
Oh, he's a critical part of this movement, and the consequences will be felt in the ballot box. I don't think people are really understanding what's going on right here. Most of those people that are protesting and wanting to see a ban on assault
Hold on, Lindsay, we got to stop right there. Vice President Harris is speaking. We're going to get right back to you. We're going to go to her live, speaking from Nashville, Tennessee.
Heidi Campbell, Nashville.
Harris, nice to see you.
Caleb Hemmer.
Charlotte Oliver, welcome to my district.
Oh, well, thank you for welcoming me. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Jeff Yarbrough from Nashville. Harold, thanks for being here.
So go back to guests.
Hey, cousin.
Paul Mitchell, here in Nashville.
Good to be with you.
Good to see you.
How have you been? You good? It's good to be back.
Hey, Sam McKenzie.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our guests. Vice President Harris is meeting with some representatives now. She's sort of reenacting that Key and Peele speech where she's like, hello, how you doing? Congratulations. We're going to go back as soon as she begins speaking. We'll start with Alencia. Again, what were you saying about the potential consequences here if there's any sort of local political shenanigans that prevent Justin Pearson from returning to the State House?
Well, just quickly, young people, there are going to be more young people voting in the next election. And young people were the ones that were filling the state capitol on issues of gun violence, of issues on voting, on issues of democracy, on issues of abortion. And if they see that their mayor or a Democrat does not stand with the people that have stood up for the lives of 6 people who were massacred, they will make sure that they fill in the ballot box. I mean, I think sometimes we forget about the power of young people and their voting bloc until something happens, like the midterm elections, until we see in these local and state races how they are the difference to get laws and bills passed that will protect them. And so there will be, I firmly believe that there will be consequences for this mayor, and people will want to know exactly what is the reason that he wouldn't make sure that he came back to his position when he was duly elected by his citizens.
And it would be a disenfranchisement of over 70,000 voters who are represented in that district who put Pearson there. This is another thing. I want to play, Joyce, I want to play you some sound from Fox and Friends. Now, look, I don't play sound from Fox and Friends lightly. Usually it hurts my ears and there's nonsense being spouted. But I want to sort of highlight some of the justifications being given by the right for this behavior and get your thoughts on the other side.
Sending a message not to storm our government buildings, right? Because these three were leading those protesters onto the balcony in the House chamber last week. Then it carries into this week, and the Republican-led House has said, we won't stand for this.
The nonsense! Now, I would argue that then you should kick out Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the rest of those terrorist-friendly members of Congress that we have. But just from a legal standpoint and a political standpoint, Joyce, when you hear Fox and Friends say things like they stormed the Capitol, this wasn't a storming of the of the Tennessee state Capitol. This was a protest, correct? There's a difference between an attack and a protest.
Well, look, when you played that sound, I thought they had finally come to their senses on January 6th and were looking at the insurrection the appropriate way. Obviously not, though. I mean, this is just blatant hypocrisy, and I regret that, but I think we have to call it out, because when you compare this to January 6th, it's clear that there's no comparison. Speaking legally, you're correct that there was a protest. The Republican legislators alleged that these three Tennessee Democrats violated decorum rules by appearing in the well of the House and protesting down there. I understand that there's a Tennessee law that might arguably permit that. I don't know the details of that. It's entirely possible that this could have never been a decorum violation. But there's a second reason it can't be one, which is because the conduct that they were engaging in was speech. It might have been loud. It might have been something the Republicans didn't like, but it was First Amendment protected speech.
Alincia Johnson, thank you so much for starting us off on the show. Joyce Vance will be staying with me